Have you ever walked into a house and felt an unsettling chill that made you want to turn around and walk right out? Perhaps you sensed the eyes on you weren't happy to see you, or the room itself seemed to swallow any joy you carried inside. This feeling might tell you something crucial. Not every place is worthy of your presence. As we grow older, one of the greatest lessons we learn is that our energy, our tranquility, and our well-being should be fiercely protected. You see, age grants us a certain freedom, the freedom to choose where we go and whom we spend our time with. However, some homes simply do not deserve a visit, no matter how much spare time we have. Instead of wasting hours in uncomfortable settings, we owe it to ourselves to seek environments where warmth and respect are priorities. Today, let's explore why certain houses, despite belonging to friends, relatives, or acquaintances, are better left off our itinerary once we reach a certain stage in life. There are a few distinct kinds of homes that can steal your peace and leave you feeling drained or even questioning your value. To make this clearer, I will share some real-life illustrations, stories from friends, relatives, or acquaintances, because it is often through these examples that we truly grasp the significance of protecting our emotional and mental well-being. The first kind of home to avoid is the one where you realize, almost immediately, that you aren't truly wanted. There is a dramatic difference between being invited out of politeness and being invited out of genuine eagerness to spend time together. I recall visiting a distant cousin's home where I sensed a clear reluctance from the moment she opened the door. She greeted me with a lukewarm hello, quickly glanced at her watch, and kept dropping hints that she had more pressing matters to attend to. We sat in her living room for about half an hour, making small talk that felt forced. Instead of feeling welcomed, I felt like an afterthought. Looking back, it became obvious that I wasn't there because she genuinely missed me. I was there because she felt compelled to extend an obligatory invitation. As we get older, we need to be more discerning about this. Life is simply too short to waste our time and emotional resources on people who invite us into their space out of duty rather than desire. If a home consistently sends those signals, if the hosts seem checked out, uninterested, or relieved to see you leave, then that is a place that does not deserve your precious presence. Furthermore, there is another type of house that you should approach with caution, the one perpetually brimming with drama and negativity. This sort of environment can feel chaotic from the moment you step over the threshold. It may appear in the form of constant bickering among family members, never-ending complaints about life's injustices, or air so thick with tension you can practically taste it. I have a friend, Mr. Watson, who spent much of his youth in a home like that. Whenever he dropped by his parents' place, arguments seemed to erupt over trivial matters. Who left the light on? Why the mail was checked late? Or how the neighbor's lawn looked better than theirs. It wasn't just typical family disagreements. It was an unrelenting storm of negativity that overshadowed any semblance of normal conversation. Even at a family gathering meant for celebration, voices would rise over the smallest conflict. Over time, he realized these visits left him emotionally exhausted and anxious. Once he recognized how corrosive this environment was to his own well-being, he started minimizing his time there. It wasn't an easy decision, because these were his parents, and cultural expectations told him he had an obligation to visit. But sometimes, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's simply necessary for protecting your mental and emotional health. Next, there are homes that invite you over only when they need something from you. Maybe they require a favor, a bit of free babysitting, some money, or assistance with house repairs. And yet, whenever you are the one in need of understanding, emotional support, or just a companion to chat with, these people vanish. I know a gentleman named Mr. Rowland who experienced this with a relative. Every time this relative called, it was about babysitting her children, or driving her to the store, rarely about asking how Mr. Rowland was doing or whether he needed help around his own house. After the 10th or 11th time, he started to see the pattern. She wanted him there, but not for his personality or conversation. She needed a problem solver and an errand runner, not a guest. By the time he turned 70, he came to a pivotal realization. He was giving away his energy without receiving any form of kindness or care in return. It was a lopsided dynamic that left him feeling used and underappreciated. When he decided to set firmer boundaries, he felt an enormous sense of relief, as though he had reclaimed a piece of himself that had been held hostage by someone else's constant demands. Then there is the house where you feel like your visit is a burden from the moment you arrive. You can sense it in the host's tone, the way they check their phone every few minutes, or how they fail to offer you a seat or a cup of tea. Rather than exuding warmth and relief at having you there, they give you the vibe that they are doing you a favor by letting you in. My dear neighbor, Mrs. Albert, once told me about her experience with an old friend who had drifted apart over the years. She decided to pay this friend a surprise visit, thinking they could reconnect. Yet the door was opened with such reluctant body language, it was as if every second Mrs. Albert stayed was costing the host some unseen toll. In the middle of their conversation, the host even took a personal call and left Mrs. Albert sitting alone for almost 10 minutes, feeling foolish. When she finally excused herself and left, it was as though a weight lifted from her shoulders. This taught her a powerful lesson. Your presence should never be treated as if it's imposing on someone's more important schedule. Ultimately, if your arrival brings more sighs than smiles, you are better off spending time in places where you are genuinely cherished. A related but distinct concern is the home where you experience outright disrespect. Sometimes, older adults are treated like afterthoughts in their own families, as if their wisdom and contributions are no longer relevant. At other times, the disrespect comes in more subtle forms: interruptions during conversations, rolling of eyes, or dismissive remarks that cut you short. Let me share an example. I have a relative who spent years trying to maintain a relationship with a sibling who rarely let her finish a single sentence at family dinners. This sibling would wave off her comments with, "You wouldn't understand," or "We've moved beyond that. It's not your era." The older she got, the more she realized that no matter how hard she tried to engage in that space, she left feeling belittled and small. Ultimately, she decided that continuing to visit that household caused more harm than good to her sense of self-worth. We must remember that respect is not a luxury. It's the bedrock of any healthy relationship, regardless of age. There are also places that are simply toxic to your mental health, and these might overlap with drama or negativity, but often in more insidious ways. Toxicity can manifest as subtle put-downs, manipulative behavior, or even a cold atmosphere that you can't quite articulate, but still weighs heavily on your spirit. One acquaintance, Ms. Elder, once shared that her nephew's home always seemed oppressively tense, even though no one ever openly fought. It was the kind of place where you felt you had to tiptoe around every conversation topic to avoid triggering some hidden conflict. Ms. Elder noticed that after each visit, she would lie awake half the night replaying every word she said, worried she might have overstepped. This emotional toll was so significant that she decided to limit her visits, focusing instead on environments that supported her desire for peace and serenity. By prioritizing her emotional safety, Ms. Elder found she could maintain better self-care and a calmer mindset. Finally, we come to the type of home that no longer aligns with your personal growth. We each evolve in unique ways as we age. Our tastes, interests, values, and overall perspective on life shift over time. Maybe you once enjoyed lively parties or superficial banter, but now you yearn for meaningful conversations and quiet reflection. Or perhaps you now prioritize healthy living and mindful behaviors, but a friend's home revolves around late-night drinking sessions and drama you have long since outgrown. One friend of mine, Ms. Bell, used to drop by a particular relative's home because it was always full of entertainment. Lots of people, big feasts, and hours of chatter. Yet as Ms. Bell grew older, she discovered she preferred smaller gatherings where everyone could speak from the heart. Visiting that bustling house felt more like a performance than a genuine connection, and she found herself longing for a deeper sense of belonging. When she realized the environment there was stuck in old, repetitive patterns, she had to make a conscious choice to gravitate toward places that reflected her newfound focus on introspection and authentic sharing. We should never feel obligated to remain in circumstances that stifle our growth, just because it used to be our norm. The ability to walk away from spaces that do not support who we have become is a significant part of aging gracefully. Many people feel guilty stepping back from relationships or environments they've outgrown, often because of family ties or obligations. Yet, in our later years, it becomes clear that guilt can be an anchor, keeping us from discovering healthier, more fulfilling spaces. This doesn't mean we abandon the people we love. It simply means we discern the line between genuine connection and draining obligation. In truth, a smaller circle of meaningful bonds can sustain our happiness more effectively than a wide net of strained acquaintances. Time, more than ever, is our most precious resource. When you frequently leave a particular home feeling anxious or upset, you're losing irreplaceable moments that could be spent in more uplifting settings. Occasional conflict is part of life, but there's a vast difference between normal disagreements and a toxic atmosphere that depletes your spirit. Once you recognize that difference, it becomes easier to protect your well-being and direct your energy toward those who truly value your presence. Walking away can be difficult if you've spent years meeting everyone else's expectations. Still, the essence of freedom in later life is realizing you no longer have to fulfill duties that erode your peace. Sometimes, the bravest act is choosing yourself. Understanding that protecting your mental and emotional health isn't selfish, but rather a necessary form of self-care. This might involve gradual distance rather than a dramatic exit. You might decline certain invitations or suggest meeting in a neutral setting. If others genuinely respect you, they'll accept your boundaries. If they resist, that only confirms your need for space. Over time, selecting environments that nourish your soul becomes second nature. Places filled with warmth and positivity become your go-to, and you naturally gravitate toward people who appreciate your well-being. You might also notice that familiarity can be misleading. Just because you've been visiting a particular home for years doesn't mean it's healthy. Recognizing that you've earned the right to guard your peace is a key step in aging gracefully. I invite you to share your stories and experiences. Maybe you've had to distance yourself from a negative environment or are still deciding how to draw those boundaries. By discussing these challenges, we build a supportive community that understands the courage it takes to say no when necessary. Ultimately, every time you choose not to visit a place that diminishes your joy, you invest in yourself. And often, leading by example encourages others to reevaluate their own unhealthy situations. Our time is finite, and it's more fulfilling to spend it with people who truly celebrate our presence. Living for yourself doesn't mean shutting out love or compassion. It means offering them in spaces that genuinely honor who you are. That choice is both liberating and deeply affirming for anyone seeking a more contented, meaningful life. I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this topic. Have you ever felt compelled to distance yourself from certain homes or relationships because they clashed with your peace of mind? Did you find it liberating or challenging, or maybe both? Share your stories, lessons, or advice so we can all benefit from one another's wisdom. If this message sparked any insights or reflections, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I deeply appreciate the chance to connect with you, and I hope these words remind you that it's never too late to prioritize your own well-being. Wishing you peace, understanding, and the strength to choose your spaces wisely.